Vuitton is the most valuable luxury fashion brand in the world. Its CEO, Bernard Arnault, is also the man on the planet with a net worth of around 180. Looking at the success of today, you would never guess the company was started by a man who was homeless during his teenage years, no education, and slept in a forest. Louis Vuitton is a true rags to riches story, but the company would object of a hostile takeover, countless lawsuits, and other controversies. This is the insane story of Louis Vuitton and how a tiny family business evolved into powerful brands in the world. Louis Vuitton was born in 1820 and grew up working on his family farm in France in a small village called Ancaille in the middle of nowhere. They had no electricity or running water. Louis' father Xavier was a miller and farmer, whilst his mother Corinne made hats to help make some extra cash. There are no records showing that Louis ever received an education. The nearest school was in a village 6 miles away, and it's believed he worked time on the family farm without learning how to read or write. Louis had been working in the fields every day from dusk till dawn, just to get food to help feed his family. Needless to say, the Vuittons were struggling financially, and young Louis was born into a situation that doomed him from ever having a bright future. And then got much worse. Louis' mother died when he was just 10 years, and his father quickly remarried another woman. But Louis' new slut was incredibly controlling and manipulative towards him, and constantly got into fights with her. And so, when he was just 13 years old, he ran away from home with plans to go to Paris. He slept in the middle of the night without even saying goodbye. There was just one problem. It was 225 miles away, and Louis had no or food, so he was forced to walk along dirt roads. Most nights, he slept in the woods with an empty stomach and just a to keep him warm. Every time he ran into a new village, he would do odds in exchange for food or coins. However, there was never enough left over for housing, so he continued to sleep in the woods or wherever he could find shelter for the night. Through these various odds, Louis was able to pick up skills from craftsmen, and he learned to work with metal, stone, fabric, and wood. This collection of various skills would later transform his life. But at the rate, travel was incredibly slow. It took him 3 years to Paris. Not long after he arrived in Paris, Louis was to work as an apprentice boxmaker and packer. Boxmakers were custom-sized boxes for clients, as well as pack and unpack them when a client was about to go on a trip. This job allowed him to meet many people from the upper class who were looking for custom-made luggage for their travel. And Louis worked here for several years, learning the craft and working as he could. In fact, in 1851, the Empress of France ended being a customer and took notice of his fine craftsmanship. She had him as her personal boxmaker and packer. For most boxmakers, it would be the highest honor anyone could ever achieve in their career. Louis had from a homeless teenager with nothing to his name to now working a prestigious job amongst royalty. That was a massive achievement on its own. But Louis Vuitton had an even bigger vision for his future. Getting married when he was 33, Louis used his savings to start his business and opened up his own boxmaking workshop in Paris to begin selling his own products. You see, Louis had noticed a major flaw in the luggage of the day. All of the boxes were made of leather and had dome-shaped tops, so that rain would roll off the top of the luggage. The major issue was that it was impossible to stack them, so packers had to take the boxes one by one. Louis began experimenting with different materials to use instead, and found that canvas was lighter, durable, or water-resistant, which meant the trunks could have flat tops instead. This made everything more efficient, as it was now possible to stack them up and pack multiple trunks at the same time, and they were also more. Louis' new suitcase design brought on the dawn of modern luggage. At this point, Louis had already built up his professional reputation as well as connections to the upper class, so once he launched his line of luggage, it was immediately a huge success. He even created a Louis Vuitton catalog so the customers could look at products that he had available, have them made before sending it to their homes. Within 2 years of his new suitcases, they were considered an elegant and must-have accessory amongst the wealthy, as it became a status symbol, and the brand became so popular that he was receiving orders from around the world. He even began receiving orders from royals as far away as Egypt. In 1859, Louis made enough profit to hire a team of craftsmen to fill his orders. He opened a new workshop outside of Paris where he had 20 employees. Around that time, more and more people would travel by train and boat, so the number of his potential increased exponentially. Traveling was no longer a hobby exclusive to the rich. People from all walks of life were now in need of high-quality luggage. It would seem as though Louis had made it and would go on to succeed for the rest of his life. Unfortunately, that was not the case. France was heading to war, and tragedy was about to strike again for Louis Vuitton. Before this chapter, I have a question for you. Have you heard about the sneaker company Vessi? Now here's the thing, if you get caught in the rain sneakers normally, your shoes can get ruined and your feet are gonna get soaked. But today's video sponsor Vessi has the solution. 100% waterproof sneakers that will keep your feet dry while the weather. I've been wearing my own pair of Vessis for a little while now, actually really comfortable. I've also found them useful for travel as they're so light. But the best part is they're made from Dymatex, which is dual climate material which will keep you cool in summer and warm in the weather. So it's a great investment as you can wear the shoes around. Plus, if you use the link in the description and enter code, you'll get $25 off your pair of Vessi shoes. So if you want a comfortable, stylish sneaker you can wear all seasons, check out Vessi today by clicking the top link in the description below. That's vessi.com/magnates, promo code magnates to get your discount today. And after that, let's get back to our story. In 70, when Louis was 49 years old, the Franco-Prussian broke out. Louis had to flee his home and live in a cramped shed with thousands of others. Food supplies were extremely low, and he feared for his life. When Louis could finally return to his shop in 1861, everything was destroyed. Windows were smashed, equipment was stolen, and he had lost everything he'd worked so hard for. But instead of giving up, he decided to use his savings to re-business, and vowed that it would be even better than it was before. With people displaced from the war, there were far more empty shops of rent throughout the city. So Louis Vuitton took advantage of this, opening his new shop in a much more wealthy, aristocratic location in Paris. It was perfect, because it was right next to the railway station and the Grand Hotel, so travelers who needed new luggage didn't need to go to find the Louis Vuitton store. By 1872, he came out with a new design, luggage made out of a beige canvas with stripe. This became incredibly popular, and people loved showing off in style. Many other brands tried to copy his style, but his bags were such ridiculously high quality, the customers still preferred a true Vuitton bag. For the next 20 years, Louis continued to work at his new shop in Paris, until his death when he was 70 years old. But his legacy was able to live on through his son George, who took over the family business. George sought out to expand the brand globally, such as opening a popular store in London. At this point, Louis Vuitton luggage was so popular that many other box makers were beginning to make counterfeits. So in 1896, George Vuitton put out the now iconic LV monogram to make it harder to copy. The LV were his father's initials, in honor of the man who started the brand, but he also came up with the idea of adding a revolutionary new lock on it that would make it impossible for thieves to pick them. By the year 900, the company had 100 employees, and it continued to grow year after year. All of the employees were trained for a very long time in order to be expert box makers. Even to this day, Louis Vuitton employees train for 18 months to 2 years before they're trusted to make one of the products own. The company also began to expand into a whole new line of because of another fashion icon, Coco Chanel. In 1925, she commissioned a small dome-shaped handbag. At first, this was a design that she personally came up with, and it was just for her. However, it wanted to be mass-produced, and it was given the name Alma. This was massively successful. So Louis Vuitton decided to make more small bags like the Keepall, Speedy, and No. Before Louis Vuitton, bags were often seen as quite inelegant and bulky, but the company had a big role in them being seen as much more fashionable. George Vuitton died in 1936, and the company was then passed over to Gaston Louis. However, Gaston took over the company at a very difficult time, because in just a few years, France was again heading to war. During World War II, contracts were cancelled, and Gaston was forced to shut down the Louis Vuitton factory. Paris had a siege again. The only way Gaston Vuitton could save the business was to collaborate with Nazi Germany. An author named Steph Vinci wrote a book called Louis Vuitton, A French Saga. In her research of the company archives, she asked if she could see records from World War II. Almost immediately, the representatives from the company tried to avoid showing her the information. They claimed that all documents from 1930 to 1945 were destroyed in a fire. But after doing a lot of digging into other historic documents, Daphne discovered that Louis Vuitton was able to open a glamorous shopfront in the Hotel de Parc throughout the Nazi regime and collaborated with them. Meanwhile, several other brands were forced to shut down because they refused to cooperate with the Nazis. Clearly, the company was ashamed of this part of their history. But they were few. Gaston did what he needed to do in order for the company to survive. Other fashion designers like Coco Chanel also collaborated with Nazis in order to make sure her business in Paris was not destroyed. If it were not for their choice to work with the enemy, their brands likely no longer be around today. When Gaston passed away in 1970, his son-in-law Henry Racamere took over managing the Louis Vuitton brand. So we're now into the 4th generation. But unlike his ancestors, Henry already had a lot of business experience from a company before. So when he took over Louis Vuitton, he was able to take the brand to a whole new level. Henry began making major changes to the Louis Vuitton brand in order to grow it from a family-owned company to the corporation that it is today. He switched Louis Vuitton's business from wholesale to retail. By 1978, he expanded Louis Vuitton into many other countries, including Japan. And over the course of 6 years, and accounting for modern inflation, sales went from $1 million to $260 million. And so, in 1984, Henry decided to take the company public, and Vuitton sold out the 1 million shares valued at $63.60 each. Henry took this momentum and influx of cash and opening more stores all across the globe. By 1987, Vuitton reached $1 billion in sales. It was far beyond what young Louis could have ever dreamed of when he first opened his first store in Paris. Henry also decided that the company should combine with Moet Hennessy, a luxury drinks company which produced champagne and cognac, and together they formed a new luxury conglomerate called LVMH. In theory, by joining together, it would allow them all resources and expand even faster. Unfortunately, after the merger, Henry didn't end up getting along well with the president of Moet Hennessy, so Henry asked a successful property developer he knew, named Bernard Arnault, to help him manage the situation. Unfortunately, putting him in as an investor would backfire in a huge way. Bernard secretly bought 43% of the shares of Louis Vuitton, got support from the Moet and Hennessy families to gain more power in the MH. Henry felt he'd been betrayed by the man he'd been to help him, and so took Bernard to court, demanding that he should no longer have the majority stake in Louis Vuitton. But the courts ultimately sided with Bernard. Henry was so angry about being backstabbed by his friend that he decided to quit working for Louis Vuitton completely. Now, for the first time in nearly 100 years, no one from the Vuitton family was with the brand. After all of this drama of Bernard's hostile takeover, sales of Louis Vuitton began to crash. Journalists were no longer covering the brand, and for a while, it looked as though the company might fail. However, Bernard knew how to turn the fortune of the company around. Louis Vuitton to make a comeback when it began to collaborate with several fashion designers during its 100th anniversary collection. Big names like Vivienne Westwood and Isaac Mizrahi all created their own take on the iconic LV logo. They created products that customers had never seen before, and were once again trying to get their hands on a Louis Vuitton bag. Ultimately, Bernard's investment in Louis Vuitton paid off in a massive way. He is now the CEO of LVMH, and in 2021 was officially dubbed him the richest man in the world with a net worth of over $100 billion. Now, of course, as stock prices move, his rich list rankings change, but he's almost always in the 5 richest people in the world. However, out of the wealthiest people like Bezos, Musk, Gates, Buffett, Bernard Arnault is definitely the least known, as he prefers to stay out of the spotlight. What we do know is he has such a ruthless reputation in business, known as the Wolf in Cashmere, which is why today, LVMH has over 70 different brands it owns through all of the acquisitions and mergers Bernard has pulled off. This one company owns many of the most luxurious brands in the world, and yet, it all started with a broke, homeless teenager. In the modern world, Louis Vuitton continued to expand its brand with new colourful styles that resonated with a younger audience. In 1997, Marc Jacobs became the creative director. He designed the first ready-to-wear line, and created the popular monogram Vernus line of handbags. Marc Jacobs also expanded LV into watches, jewellery and sunglasses, although he eventually would move on from Louis Vuitton and come out with his own line of clothing and accessories. Of course, the company has not its issues. Louis Vuitton has an entire team of lawyers search copyright infringement, and they don't hesitate to sue someone who believe that they're copying the brand logo. They've even sued Google for silks and advertisements, leading people to fake bags. Google won the case though, arguing they can't control what their users put on the internet. Louis Vuitton has also gone on to collaborate with brands like Supreme, which hit their demographic like never before. Believe it or not though, Louis Vuitton actually sued Supreme as well for copying their logo, and they realized how profitable a collaboration would be. Now, Louis Vuitton Supreme items resell for a small fortune. For example, the leather truck is on sale for $125,000. Well, even the Supreme hoodie is over $5,000. Of course, the fit problem Louis Vuitton had since the early days of the business is still an issue for the brand today. They estimate that every year they lose hundreds of millions of dollars to counterfeit versions of their products. However, even after being in business for 168 years, they don't seem to be going down anytime soon. Louis Vuitton continues to be a brand that people aspire to wear, and it's a staple among the rich and famous. Currently, they are the #1 fashion brand in the entire world, but at $39 billion. With more than 400 stores, you can find a Louis Vuitton in nearly every major city around the globe. But what do you think of Louis Vuitton? Do you think it's overpriced by all the hype, or do you feel that the quality of the products justifies the massive price tag? Comment below, and then make sure you click on the next video in my series Tree Brands, which is the story of the orphan who built Rolex. Answers the question, why is Rolex really so expensive? The Rolex video is the perfect video to watch after this, so I'll hopefully see you there. Cheers.